Today I'm going over my top 3 quotes from my 2015 short story. I used to do a lot of writing streams, so one of them was the Polgar experiment about Judith Polgar and her rise to becoming a 2700 super grandmaster in chess. This was almost like, oh, this is the original Queen's Gambit, and it was really more about Laszlo, their father, who was such a brilliant teacher who was able to train not one but 3 of his daughters to become grandmasters at chess. Kind of the ultimate meritocracy example. 2 grandmasters and 1 female grandmaster, women's grandmaster. The number 1 is during one of her first tournaments where she goes in and there's a much more experienced player who walks up to her and says, "You're that beginner everybody's been talking about." And she gets a little offended and defensive, and so she says, "Beginner, I'm 1950. She declares her rating, and she's come so far and worked so hard to get it. So he returns back and says, "That is a beginner, I'm afraid." That sort of gives her a eyes wide open moment where she realizes, despite how much time and effort and stress she's put into it, she's barely even scratched the surface. Right? That's just the tip of the iceberg. He's not saying it to be mean, and he actually helps her a little bit later, but it's just to show, like, wow, even with all this, like, she spent years in training and read books, and her father's helped her and trained her and all this kind of stuff, and she's only a beginner still in the context of a game that takes her whole life to really become a master at, which she obviously eventually does. Number 2 is sort of like an epilogue afterwards, where she reflects on the journey of how long it took and how it was never about, see, she's known as an offensive-minded player, but she understands the patience that it took to get there. People see these flashy bullet games and they see these offensive flair tactics, but then she reflects at the end. The last king standing is never the most capable. It's the most patient. It's the one who's able to withstand and go through all the adversity along the way. The one who's able to watch their opponent after opponent, every single rival, destroy and defeat themselves through their own mistakes, through their own flaws and impatience and lust and greed. In other words, you're letting your opponent defeat themselves through all their flaws while having less yourself. That's kind of the game of chess in a vacuum, right? Sometimes it comes down to that extreme amount of patience, not only within a particular game where you're not trying to just go for the home run, go for the checkmate just like that every move, but also in a larger lifelong sense, like to be able to keep playing, keep learning over dozens of years, over thousands of hours, thousands of games. And then here's another quote that she encounters from a grandmaster at some point. I forget who it was. It was a lot of these are like generic made up characters, just that with her as the focal point, where he says chess is 75% memory. Oh, and what's the other 25%? Somebody asks him, whoever goes black or white. So the whole game boils down to either memory or who goes first or second. Regardless of, how much tactical this and that, it does still hold a certain truth. Because even whatever tactics you're talking about or your ability to see them comes down to possibly memorizing sequence of moves, especially in the modern day. It's more relevant with all the analytics and stuff. And then here's just a bonus one, number 4, that was kind of more of a comic relief moment. He's very young and her friend's going to church and she's like, "Would you like to join me?" And she says, "No, sorry, I don't go to church." And then she reflects to herself in her own mind, "I do something incredibly tedious every Sunday that involves a cross. And it even starts with a C, but it's not church. It's called chess."